Hello everyone, welcome to AWS Tutorials. In AWS Tutorials, you'll learn about AWS services. Today we are going to talk about AWS Glue Studio integration with code repository. So let's get started. AWS Glue Studio is used to build Glue ETL jobs. And you can build job in various ways. You can write script within the studio, or you can import your script within the studio, or you can also use a GUI-based interface to drag and drop different actions and transformations to build a job. Or you can also use an interactive job development using Notebook. Many of these features I have already described in my other tutorials. In addition to building the job, Glue Studio can also be used for monitoring your ETL job. But today we are going to focus on how Glue Studio can be integrated with code repository. So when you are building a Glue job, or some developer is building a Glue job using Glue Studio, there is a requirement that other developers also wants to work on the same Glue job. It could be a collaborative development where many other developers are working together on the same Glue job. Or once you have built the Glue job, you might want to use a CI/CD pipeline to automatically deploy this job across various other environments. Like you're building this job in a dev environment, and then you want to use a CI/CD pipeline to deploy it to test or production environment. So when you have this kind of requirements, you need to integrate a code repository. So you need to have integration of code repository with Glue Studio, so that whatever Glue job you write, you can store. You can store and version control in code repository, and then using that code repository, other developers can also check in their part of work to the job. So people can work in a collaborative manner for development of the jobs. And then same code repository can also be used by CI/CD pipeline to move job between different environments like test and production. So the primary purpose of integrating code repository with Glue Studio is to first enable collaborative development between the developers, and second, enable CI/CD pipeline to read the job configuration and code details from the code repository to run a pipeline which can be used to move the job across various environments. So AWS Glue Studio supports code repository, and basically this feature has been enabled, I think, a couple of months back, if I'm not wrong. And Glue Studio supports two code repositories at this point of time. One is AWS CodeCommit, which is a code repository or source control solutions from AWS, and other one is GitHub. So it provides integration with both CodeCommit and GitHub. Now, few things you need to know for such integration. So first is through this integration, Glue Studio supports both pull and push with post integration. That means you can create a Glue job in a studio, and then you can push that to the code repository. And if someone else is modifying if someone has modified the code job and you want to pull it back to your own studio environment, you can do that as well. It supports multiple branches. So within one repository, if you want to move your code from one branch to another, you can do that. It enables job level repository configuration, and that's something which I'm like, yeah, I mean, as a feature, it supports job level repository configuration. That means for each job, you have to configure the repository. And that is something which personally I'm not very happy about, in the sense that it should provide, I mean, I would expect it to be something like where you have one repository configured and then every job can be then stored into that repository. But right now, if you look at the configuration, which I'm going to show in the demo, you have to configure repository per job, which in a way I don't personally like. And then when you create the job and store into the code repository, basically it stores the complete information about the job, all the configuration details about the job, as well as code level information of the job. So everything is stored into the code repository. So it was a very small presentation because all I want to talk about is that Glue Studio supports integration with code repository and what kind of functionality it provides. Now let me show you a demo of Glue Studio integration with AWS CodeCommit and show you some of the functionalities around pushing the job, pulling the job, and so on. So let's go to the AWS console and see a quick demo about this integration. So here we are in AWS console, and I have opened up the Glue Studio in one of the tabs, and in other tab I have opened up CodeCommit. So let me first create a repository here. So I will say this is my job repository. Okay, so I'm just simply creating my or let's make it ETL repository. Okay. So let's say it's a ETL repository. I'll leave everything default. Let's create the repository. So now my repository is created. I will do one thing. I will add some code over here so that it creates a branch, because right now there is no branch in this repository, and this pull and push operation you can do only with a branch. So let me create a file here quickly. I will simply say this is just to create a branch, and I will call it AWS Dojo, and here I will call it AWS Dojo @aws-dojo.com. Oops. Okay, let's copy this thing here. File name I will say just dummy, and says Mr. Dojo is the author. Okay. So simple. I'm just simply creating this file just to create a branch, nothing more than that. So let's commit the changes. So now what I have got here is that if I go to my branches, I can see there is a main branch, which is the default branch. And of course, I can create more branch after this. But let's keep it to the main branch. Now my repo is ready. So because I have got ETL repository as a repo, which has got a main branch. So this all looks good to me. Now I can come to my Glue Studio, and I'm going to create a job. So basically, I'm not interested in creating some serious job, but I want to generate some job, which I can then use to show you the check-in and check-out kind of operation. So what I go do is in the source, I say I want to read from my Glue data catalog and write to the S3 bucket. Okay, let's create a new job here. And that's where you see the job has been configured. So what I can do here, first of all, I can go and create the configure the version control. So this is where I am integrating my Glue job with the code repository. And that's why I say that it is a job level configuration. So nowhere here I can go and configure my version control once and let every job use it. That is not possible at this point of time. I have to, for each job, configure version control and save it. I mean, it's a one-time job, but you have to do it. So, and that part I would have expected something which I can configure once and can use multiple times. But you can see here I can use both GitHub and CodeCommit. So I'm going to use AWS CodeCommit at this point of time. My repository is ETL repository. My branch is main branch, and I don't want to create any folder after that. So this all looks good to me. So my version control is done. Now let's come back to my visual, and let's quickly do some configuration changes over here. So from the source, I want to read from my Dojo database and from my sales table. I just have created some databases and table in the catalog just for the configuration purpose. And then in my transformation, I'm not going to do anything. Whatever source I read, I'm simply going to write it to the output location. And here in the target, I can say let's use JSON format, no compression, and my location is say Dojo my data output. Okay, I'm not going to run this job, but I'm just simply configuring it so that my job script is ready. So my job script is now ready. If I go to my job details, I can put my job here saying sales ETL job, and my role is a Dojo Glue role, and then I leave everything to default. Let's keep number of retries to 3 as well. So everything is default. Now I'm changing nothing into it, and I'm simply going to save this job. So now what I have done is that I have configured my job details. I have configured my script through the visual interface. I have configured my version control. Now at this point of time, if I think I run it on my local machine, it looks nice to me, then I can simply go ahead and push this job to the repository. So I can simply go to the actions option, say I want to push it to the repository. When you click on that, it's saying, hey, I'm going to put it into e-repository main branch. Are you okay? And you confirm it. And what's going to do that, it's simply going to push this job configuration detail into the repository. So let's let it be finished. It should be there anytime now. Yeah, here we go. So now it has been configured to the repository. So if I go to my code commit, now if I go to my main branch, I can see sales job folder. So for each of the jobs, this creates a folder. So it creates a sales ETL job folder. And if I go inside that, it keeps my ETL job in a configuration details in a JSON format. So in fact, if I click on that one, you can see here it is keeping all the information about. So it's keeping my job name, what role I'm going to use, how many maximum concurrency, my default arguments, my capacity, maximum retries, everything it is going to keep like that. So in fact, if I go over here, so all this configuration you put over here, everything has been stored over here. Now this one will look lot similar to how does create job API input look like. So for instance, in another tab, I have opened up this Python Boto library, and here I'm using Glue client to create a job. And if you look at these parameters, name, description, role, execution property, command, default arguments, connections, retries, allocation properties. So this whole input you see over here is similar to the input you see over. It's same format, same structure has been used. And that's why I'm saying that once you put this job configuration detail, this code, the code by the way is stored into this location in S3 bucket. Once you put all these details, basically it can then be used by your CI/CD pipeline to to move your job across various environments. And I am actually planning to do that. I'm actually planning to do a presentation about how this code repository then can be used with CI/CD pipeline. But I think that is another big topic in itself, and I'm going to park it for a later tutorial. But just to show you that whatever information it's storing about the job over here, the whole configuration information, that is a sufficient information, that is good enough information for you to be able to make an API call and create the job in any environment. You might have to parameterize few things, but other than that, you can do that. Anyway, so this is how my repository look like. So now I want to show you something. I'm going to make a change in the configuration here itself in the code repository, and I will pull it in my I'll pull my job in my studio, and I should be able to see the changes. So for instance, if I edit my job configuration in repository itself, assuming some other developer is doing this, and you say, hey, you know what, I want to change my maximum retries from 3 to 1. Okay, and with that I put my, say, Mr. Dojo 1, and address is AWS Dojo at the rate AWS -Dojo glue.com, and I commit changes. So I simply modified maximum number of retries from 3 to 1. Now, if I come to my repository, I've opened up this job, I go to my action and say, you know what, I want to pull from the repository. So it's going, hey, are you going to pull it from the main branch of the ETL repository? I say yes. And then what you see here is that it is pulling the latest job information, and should take, yeah, here we go. And it has now fetched the job information, and you can see here that number of retries is now back to, is now from 3 to 1. So you can see here that if like some other developer, if has, for instance, through his or her Glue Studio has modified the code and check into the code repository, you can pull that information, you can pull that latest configuration from the code repository. Now another thing I will like show you, suppose that I am a developer who is in my environment, and I don't have this job with me. So let me delete this job. So I'm deleting this job from my studio. So suppose I'm a developer who knows nothing about this job, but I want to pull this job. Like I want to pull this configuration for the job, but in my studio I don't have this configuration. And here in my, if I look at my repository, I do have in my repository I do have sales ETL job configuration. So what I want to do is that I want to pull it. So how do I do that? And this is another experience which I'm like, yeah, it works, but I'm not, it's not very intuitive. So for instance, in this case, what I will do, I will not care about any of the configuration things. What I will do is simply create on a Glue job, create a Glue job, and then what I do is that I go to my job details. I put here the job name. Then I go to my version control. So this job name should be the same as, so you remember that when you create a job, it creates a folder with that job name. So this name should be the same name you put here in your job details. So job name should be the same, because that's how it identifies that which job to pull. And then you go to version control. Here I simply go say, hey, I'm using AWS CodeCommit, ETL repository, main branch. So what I did, actually two things. So first I configured my version control. So AWS CodeCommit, ETL repository, and then main. And in job details, I put the job name same as it is stored into my code repository. And then I go to my action and say I want to pull from the repository. So it's saying, hey, you want to pull from this location? Yes. I confirm it. It will reload my interface. So it looks like it does nothing, because you can see your job has changed, name has changed, and like, but guess what? If you go to jobs here, you can see your job has been fetched. So that was the flow you can use to actually, so my job has been fetched. Now if I open it, it is the same job which was in the code repository. So that was the flow you use when you come to your studio, you don't have that job in your studio, but you want to pull that job from the repository. Then you simply provide the job details. In the job details, job name same as it is in the code repository. You provide your version control information, and then you simply go to the action and say, I want to pull it from the repository. It will pull that configuration information from the repository in your studio environment. And here onwards, yeah, your script is there, your job is there, you can start building it, and you can check in again, and then, yeah, you work in a collaborative manner. So that was all I wanted to show you today, that how you can use Glue Studio integration with code repository to work in a collaborative manner. And I plan to do another tutorial some point of time when I show CI/CD integration with code repository. But for now, let's stay with this small demo of working with the code repository in Glue Studio. Hope you like this video, and if you like the video, please click on the like button. Please subscribe to my channel. I promise to come back again in a week's time or so with another such tutorial. In the meantime, please stay safe and have a nice day. Bye bye.